From the outside, the Smith family seemed idyllic, a living testament to the American dream. Their home, nestled in the heart of a friendly suburban neighborhood, was the kind of place that oozed charm. Its white picket fence enclosed a vibrant garden Clarissa had lovingly cultivated, and a red tricycle sat near the porch, evidence of their daughter Ellie's frequent outdoor adventures. Neighbors often stopped to chat over the fence or wave as Nathan Smith fired up the grill on Sunday afternoons. Nathan, a 38-year-old software engineer, had built a solid career at a mid-sized tech firm. He was the quintessential family man, dependable and methodical, with a quiet warmth that put people at ease. His sharp mind and penchant for solving complex problems had earned him respect at work and at home, where he was the designated fixer of all things broken. From a wobbly kitchen chair to the Wi-Fi that mysteriously stopped working every month, Nathan was the man with the answers. But what he excelled at in logic, he sometimes lacked in emotional nuance. His love for his wife, Clarissa, and their daughter, Ellie, was deep, yet he often struggled to express it in ways that went beyond the practical. Over the years, his affection had been replaced by a rhythm of routine, packing Ellie's lunch in the morning, sorting the bills on Friday evenings, or updating Clarissa's laptop when it ran too slowly. Clarissa, by contrast, was a whirlwind of spontaneity. At 35, she was a vibrant presence with an artistic soul. Her studio at the back of the house was a kaleidoscope of colors and chaos, reflecting her passion for painting. Canvases leaned against walls, her brushes were perpetually soaking in jars, and the air often carried the faint tang of turpentine and acrylic paint. Where Nathan sought order, Clarissa thrived in unpredictability. Her laughter filled the house when she was inspired, her presence like sunlight streaming through the cracks of their increasingly mechanical life. Their 5-year-old daughter, Ellie, was the heart of the home. Bright-eyed and curious, she could often be found sprawled on the living room floor with a book in her tiny hands or racing around the backyard with her imaginary friends. Ellie's boundless energy brought Nathan and Clarissa together even on days when they felt worlds apart. For a decade, this dynamic worked, Nathan's steadiness balancing Clarissa's impulsivity, their mutual love for Ellie anchoring them. But time, as it often does, wore away at the seams. Somewhere between Nathan's late nights at the office and Clarissa's increasingly frequent art workshops, a distance crept into their marriage. At first it was almost imperceptible, a missed goodnight kiss here, an unanswered question there. But as weeks turned into months, the cracks began to show. Clarissa found herself retreating into her art, spending more and more hours in her studio. Nathan, burdened by deadlines and the weight of providing for his family, often came home too exhausted to notice her growing restlessness. Even their once cherished Friday movie nights turned into Nathan dozing off on the couch while Clarissa scrolled through her phone, Ellie asleep between them. On the surface, nothing seemed amiss. They still hosted barbecues and celebrated milestones. Friends commented on what a perfect match they were, and photos of their smiling faces lined the walls of their home. But beneath the polished veneer, Clarissa felt something gnawing at her, a yearning she couldn't quite name. It was on one of those restless evenings that she signed up for a series of art workshops at a local gallery. She told Nathan it was to refine her skills, to reignite her creative spark. He encouraged her with a distracted smile, barely looking up from his laptop. It was the same smile he had given her countless times, a smile that once warmed her heart but now felt distant, almost automatic. At the gallery, surrounded by strangers and the intoxicating smell of fresh paint, Clarissa felt a flicker of the woman she used to be before motherhood and marriage consumed her identity. She laughed freely, swapped stories with fellow artists, and lost herself in the thrill of creating. It was there, amidst the clatter of easels and the hum of conversation, that she met Alex. Alex wasn't like anyone she had known before. He was magnetic, with a quick wit and a mischievous grin that seemed to promise adventure. An artist himself, Alex had an energy that pulled people in, and Clarissa was no exception. He praised her work, often stopping by her easel to offer pointers or share a joke. Their conversation started innocently enough, about brush techniques, color palettes, and the gallery's upcoming exhibitions. But beneath the surface, a connection began to form, subtle and undeniable. Clarissa didn't think much of it at first. She told herself Alex was simply a kindred spirit, someone who understood her in ways Nathan no longer seemed to. Yet, as the weeks went on, she found herself looking forward to the workshops for reasons that had little to do with painting. Back home, Nathan remained oblivious. His world revolved around deadlines, meetings, and Ellie's bedtime stories. He didn't notice Clarissa's glowing cheeks when she returned from the gallery or the way her laughter lingered longer in the air. He assumed her improved mood was a sign that the workshops were helping her, and he felt a quiet relief, thinking they had turned a corner. But the truth was far more complicated. Clarissa stood at the edge of a precipice, torn between the comfort of her familiar life and the thrill of something new. And Nathan, so secure in the life he had built, didn't yet realize that the foundation was starting to crack beneath his feet. The next morning dawned bright and calm, the sun casting golden rays through the windows of the Smith family home. Clarissa stirred in bed, the weight of her recent choices heavy on her mind. Nathan, ever the early riser, had already left, or so she thought. The sound of the garage door closing minutes earlier had confirmed his departure, and she felt a pang of relief, mixed with guilt. From the bedroom window, Clarissa watched Nathan's sedan back out of the driveway and disappear down the street. She lingered by the window, sipping her coffee, her thoughts swirling as she prepared for the day. But what Clarissa didn't know, what she couldn't see, was that Nathan hadn't gone far. Instead of heading to his office as he usually did, Nathan turned onto the side street that looped around to their back alley. He parked just out of sight, waited for a moment to ensure the coast was clear, and drove back into their garage. The angle of the house and the design of the bedroom window made the garage invisible from Clarissa's vantage point, a detail Nathan had exploited to perfection. He turned off the car, sat in silence for a moment, and then exhaled deeply. The man who stepped out of the sedan wasn't the same Nathan who had kissed his wife goodbye just 20 minutes earlier. His movements were deliberate, his face a mask of calm hiding the storm within. In his hand was a sleek black tablet, a device that had become both his ally and his tormentor. Nathan had spent weeks preparing for this. It had started with a gut feeling, a whisper of doubt that grew louder with every late-night workshop and every unexplained phone call. The day Clarissa began turning her phone screen down whenever he walked into the room was the day he decided to act. A meticulous man by nature, Nathan approached his suspicions like any other problem, with logic and precision. He had installed the cameras under the guise of enhancing their home security. Motion detectors were mounted at the front and back doors, tiny cameras nestled discreetly within their frames. The basement, often a neglected corner of their home, now housed his setup, a web of screens and recordings capturing every inch of the house and yard. What Clarissa didn't know was that Nathan had expanded the system to include their shared spaces, the kitchen, the living room, and, more controversially, their bedroom. Nathan descended the basement stairs, the faint hum of electronics growing louder as he approached his workstation. The monitors lit up as he powered the system on, displaying a split-screen view of their home. His stomach churned as he scrolled through the previous night's footage. Nothing suspicious, just Clarissa working late in her studio. But this morning, Nathan wasn't looking for the past, he was preparing for the present. 20 minutes passed as Nathan sat in the dimly lit basement, his eyes glued to the screens. He didn't have to wait long. At precisely 9:15 a.m., the motion detector at the front door pinged, and Nathan's heart sank. On the monitor, a man approached the house. He was tall and confident, his gait casual yet deliberate. Nathan recognized him immediately, Alex. He clenched his fists, his pulse quickening as the man reached the front steps. Clarissa opened the door before Alex could knock, a smile lighting up her face in a way that Nathan hadn't seen in years. They exchanged a few words Nathan couldn't hear, their gestures relaxed, almost intimate. Alex stepped inside, and Clarissa closed the door behind him. Nathan watched as they moved into the living room, the scene unfolding like a nightmare he couldn't wake from. Clarissa and Alex stood close, their conversation becoming animated. She laughed, a carefree, melodic sound that once belonged to Nathan. And then, without hesitation, Alex leaned in and kissed her. It was no tentative peck, but a kiss filled with hunger and familiarity. Clarissa didn't pull away, instead, she melted into him, her hands clutching his shoulders. Nathan's stomach churned, a sickening mix of rage and heartbreak washing over him. He wanted to look away, to stop the recording, to destroy the evidence. But he couldn't. He forced himself to watch as they stumbled toward the couch, shedding the facade of pretense along with their inhibitions. Clarissa pulled Alex onto the couch, her movements filled with urgency. They kissed with abandon, their passion consuming them. Nathan's jaw tightened, his breathing shallow as he bore witness to the scene. His hands gripped the edge of the desk so tightly that his knuckles turned white. From this vantage point, the cameras captured everything, the betrayal in sharp, unflinching detail. Nathan felt his composure slipping, a tide of emotions threatening to pull him under. But amidst the chaos of his thoughts, a cold clarity began to take hold. He reached for the tablet, hitting the record button to preserve the footage. It wasn't just about catching them in the act, it was about taking control of the narrative. Nathan knew he needed this evidence, not just for himself, but for what was coming next. Upstairs, Clarissa and Alex remained oblivious to the silent witness in the basement. For them, the world outside had ceased to exist, their actions confined to the bubble of their shared desire. But for Nathan, the world had become sharper, more focused. Every gesture, every glance, every betrayal was etched into his mind like a scar. As he watched, his heart hardened. This wasn't the end, it was the beginning of a reckoning neither Clarissa nor Alex could foresee. Nathan sat in the shadows of the basement, his eyes fixed on the monitors that betrayed a reality he had never wanted to face. Clarissa and Alex were now entangled on the couch, their laughter and whispers muted by the silent surveillance. The betrayal played out in high-definition clarity, each moment sharpening Nathan's resolve. This wasn't just a marriage breaking apart, it was a betrayal of trust so profound it left a cavernous void in his chest. He adjusted the camera angles on his tablet, switching to the view from the ceiling-mounted lens in the living room. From this vantage point, there was no escaping the truth. Every touch, every kiss, every lingering glance between his wife and her lover was catalogued, time-stamped, and recorded. His chest tightened, the weight of it threatening to crush him. But Nathan didn't move. His mind, typically logical and structured, was now a storm of emotions. He wanted to storm upstairs, to confront them, to demand answers, but he knew it was too soon. Confrontation now would be like striking a match in a powder keg, it would explode without precision, without control. And Nathan was a man who thrived on control. Instead, he reached for the small memory card resting on the desk. Carefully, he inserted it into the recording system and began transferring the footage. Each passing second was a countdown to a decision he couldn't yet articulate but knew he would make. Upstairs, Clarissa lay sprawled on the couch, her breath uneven, her hair tousled from her time with Alex. The air between them was thick with the aftermath of their passion, but there was no guilt in her eyes, only a fleeting happiness she hadn't felt in years. Alex propped himself up on an elbow, tracing idle patterns on her arm with a smirk that spoke of satisfaction. "You're quiet," he said softly, his voice breaking the stillness. Clarissa turned her gaze to him, her expression unreadable. "It's nothing," she replied, though her tone betrayed the faintest edge of apprehension. Sometimes I feel like this is a dream. You and me. Like it's not really happening." Alex chuckled, leaning in to kiss her forehead. "It's happening, Clarissa. Every time I'm with you, it feels real. You don't have to doubt it." She smiled faintly, but her eyes darted toward the clock on the wall. It was nearing noon, and Nathan would be home by evening. The thought sent a ripple of unease through her. She sat up, pulling her robe tightly around her. "You should go soon," she murmured. "Nathan." Alex groaned, interrupting her. "Nathan, Nathan, Nathan. You always bring him up at the worst times. Do you ever stop thinking about him?" Clarissa's lips tightened, her gaze fixed on the floor. "He's still my husband," she said quietly. "And Ellie's father. I have to think about him." Alex rolled his eyes but didn't argue. He stood, pulling on his shirt with deliberate slowness. "You need to stop living your life around him," he said, his tone sharper than before. "You deserve to be happy, Clarissa. With me." She didn't respond. The words hung in the air between them, heavy with unspoken truths. As Alex bent to retrieve his shoes, he paused, frowning. "You hear that?" Clarissa froze, her pulse quickening. "Hear what?" "I thought I heard something," Alex said, straightening up. His eyes scanned the room as though expecting to find Nathan standing in the doorway. Clarissa forced a laugh, though it sounded hollow. "You're being paranoid." But Alex didn't look convinced. He grabbed his coat and moved toward the front door, his movements brisk. "Call me later," he said, glancing back at her. His smirk was gone, replaced by a wary frown. "I will," Clarissa replied, her voice softer now. She watched as he slipped out the door, the sound of it closing behind him sending a strange pang of relief through her. She sank back onto the couch, her thoughts a tangled mess. In the basement, Nathan exhaled slowly, his fists unclenching for the first time in minutes. He had heard their muffled conversation through the microphone embedded in the living room camera, their words filling him with equal parts rage and resolve. He waited until Alex's car pulled away before switching off the monitors. With the memory card securely in hand, Nathan ascended the stairs. He moved through the house silently, every step deliberate, every breath controlled. Clarissa was still on the couch, staring blankly at the ceiling. She didn't hear him approach, her thoughts too consumed by the morning's events. When Nathan finally spoke, his voice cut through the quiet like a blade. "Is this what our marriage has become?" Clarissa gasped, sitting up so quickly she nearly lost her balance. Her eyes widened in shock as she took in Nathan's presence, his calm demeanor more unnerving than any outburst could have been. "Nathan, I thought you went to work," he finished for her, holding up the memory card between his fingers. "That's what you wanted me to believe, wasn't it?" She opened her mouth to speak, but no words came out. Her heart pounded in her chest, her mind scrambling for an explanation that wouldn't come. Nathan stepped closer, his gaze never leaving hers. "I've been watching, Clarissa. I've seen everything. The lies, the late nights, the workshops." His voice grew quieter, colder. "And Alex." Clarissa's breath hitched. "Nathan, I." He raised a hand, silencing her. Don't insult me with excuses or lies. Not now." The memory card glinted in the light as Nathan dropped it onto the coffee table in front of her. "It's all there," he said, his tone devoid of emotion. "Every second of it. Your betrayal, captured for posterity." Clarissa stared at the card, her vision blurring as tears welled in her eyes. "Please, Nathan," she whispered. "Let me explain." But Nathan was already turning away, his movements deliberate and final. "Explain it to someone who cares," he said over his shoulder. "Because I'm done listening." As he walked toward the front door, Clarissa's sobs filled the house, a sound that once might have broken him, but now only steeled his resolve. Nathan had played the role of the perfect husband for too long. Now, it was time to play the role of the man who refused to be a fool. Clarissa's sobs grew louder, filling the otherwise still house as Nathan's retreating footsteps echoed toward the front door. She stumbled after him, her voice shaking as she pleaded. "Nathan, wait. Please, don't leave like this," she cried, her words tumbling over each other in desperation. "It's not what you think, it's not what it looks like." Nathan froze with his hand on the doorframe. He turned to face her, his expression unreadable, save for the hard lines carved into his features. "Not what I think?" he asked, his voice quiet but edged with steel. "I think I saw my wife, the mother of my child, desecrating everything we built together with another man on the couch where we've read bedtime stories to Ellie. So tell me, Clarissa, what exactly do you think it looks like?" Her words caught in her throat, her gaze darting around the room as if the right answer might appear out of thin air. "I was lonely," she said finally, the words spilling out in a rush. "You've been so busy with work, so distant, I felt invisible. Alex was he was a distraction, Nathan. It didn't mean anything. It was never supposed to mean anything." Nathan let out a short, humorless laugh, shaking his head. "A distraction," he repeated, his voice laced with bitter disbelief. "You burned down our life for a distraction." Clarissa took a step toward him, her hands outstretched, trembling. "I know I made a mistake, no, a terrible mistake, but please, we can fix this. For Ellie's sake, we can fix it." At the mention of their daughter, Nathan's expression darkened. "Don't you dare bring her into this," he snapped. "You don't get to justify your selfishness by dragging Ellie into it." Clarissa flinched, tears streaming down her cheeks. "Nathan, I love you," she whispered. "I love our family. Please don't throw it all away." Nathan's eyes narrowed. "I didn't throw anything away. You did. Without another word, he turned and strode down the hallway toward Ellie's room. Panic surged through Clarissa as she followed, her heart pounding in her chest. What are you doing? She demanded, her voice trembling. Nathan ignored her, pushing open the door to Ellie's room. Their daughter was sitting on the floor, surrounded by a colorful array of blocks and stuffed animals. She looked up at her father with a bright smile, oblivious to the storm raging between her parents. Daddy! Ellie said, holding up a block tower she had built. Look what I made. Nathan crouched down to her level, his face softening just enough for her to see the love that burned behind the pain. That's amazing, sweetheart, he said, his voice gentler than it had been all morning. You're so smart. Ellie beamed, reaching out to tug at his sleeve. Will you play with me, Daddy? Nathan hesitated for a moment, his heart twisting. Not right now, baby, he said softly. We're going on a little trip, okay? Just you and me. Clarissa's breath hitched. Nathan, you can't just take her, she said, stepping into the room. We need to talk about this. Talk. Nathan turned to her, his calm demeanor finally cracking to reveal the raw fury beneath. You mean like you talked to me about Alex? Like you talked to me about how you've been tearing this family apart while pretending everything was fine? Clarissa flinched, her back hitting the doorframe. I'll do whatever it takes to make this right, she pleaded. Please, Nathan, don't punish Ellie for my mistakes. This isn't punishment, Nathan said coldly as he scooped Ellie into his arms. This is protection. From you. Ellie giggled, wrapping her tiny arms around Nathan's neck. Where are we going, Daddy? Somewhere safe, Nathan said, his voice softening again as he kissed her forehead. You'll see, sweetheart. Clarissa stepped forward, desperation clawing at her chest. Nathan, stop. You can't just take her, this is her home. She needs me. Nathan turned back to her, his gaze icy. She needs stability. She needs a parent who puts her first. Can you say that's what you've been doing? Clarissa opened her mouth, but no words came. The truth was suffocating, its weight crushing her under the force of her own guilt. Nathan didn't wait for her to respond. He carried Ellie out of the room, his steps steady and unyielding. Clarissa followed him through the house, her pleas growing louder, more frantic. Nathan, please, don't do this. We can go to counseling, anything you want. Just don't take her away from me. Nathan reached the front door, Ellie's small head resting against his shoulder. He paused for a moment, his grip tightening on the doorknob. You made your choice, Clarissa, he said without looking back. Now I'm making mine. He opened the door and stepped outside, leaving Clarissa frozen in the doorway. The sound of the door slamming shut behind him reverberated through the house, echoing in her ears like a gunshot. She stumbled to the window, her hands pressed against the glass as she watched Nathan buckle Ellie into the back seat of his car. Clarissa's tears blurred her vision as she watched the car pull out of the driveway and disappear down the street, just as it had that morning. This time, however, she knew it wasn't coming back. The silence that followed was deafening, pressing down on her like a suffocating weight. Clarissa sank to the floor, her sobs racking her body as the enormity of what had just happened finally set in. Nathan was gone. Ellie was gone. And the life she had taken for granted was slipping through her fingers like sand. Clarissa sat on the cold hardwood floor of the living room, the silence around her a stark contrast to the storm raging within. Hours passed, though she barely noticed. Her mind replayed the scene over and over, Nathan's words, the sight of Ellie in his arms, the sound of the door slamming behind him. It felt surreal, like a nightmare she couldn't wake up from. The house, once filled with laughter and life, now felt hollow. Every corner seemed to mock her with memories of a life she had destroyed. The couch where Ellie had once built forts now bore the weight of her betrayal. The walls, adorned with family photos, seemed to glare down at her, their smiles frozen in happier times. Clarissa picked up the memory card Nathan had left on the coffee table, turning it over in her hands as if it might hold the answers she desperately needed. It was a damning artifact, one she couldn't bear to watch but couldn't bring herself to discard. Her phone buzzed, snapping her out of her spiral. She grabbed it, hoping against hope it might be Nathan. Instead, it was Alex. His name on the screen sent a jolt of anger through her. She let the call go to voicemail, her trembling fingers clutching the device as though it might shatter. When the voicemail notification popped up, she hesitated before pressing play. Alex's voice, smooth and confident, filled the room. "Hey, Clarissa. I know things got tense earlier, but I just wanted to say I'm here for you. Call me when you're ready." She threw the phone onto the couch, fury and despair mixing in equal measure. Alex's words, once intoxicating, now felt hollow and selfish. This was his doing too. He had been a willing participant in tearing her life apart, and yet he sounded as though nothing had changed. "No," she whispered, the word barely audible. Then louder, "No." Clarissa rose to her feet, her body trembling with the weight of her emotions. She marched into her studio, her sanctuary, and froze at the sight of the half-finished painting on the easel. It was a portrait of Ellie, her bright smile captured in vibrant strokes of yellow and pink. The sight broke her. She fell to her knees, her sobs echoing off the walls. "I'm sorry," she cried into the emptiness. "I'm so sorry." Meanwhile, Nathan drove aimlessly, Ellie chattering away in the back seat, blissfully unaware of the gravity of the situation. He glanced at her through the rearview mirror, his heart aching as she hummed a tune from her favorite cartoon. "Where are we going, Daddy?" she asked, her eyes sparkling with innocent curiosity. "Somewhere safe, sweetheart," he replied, forcing a smile. "Just you and me for a little while." Ellie giggled, kicking her legs in excitement. "Like an adventure?" "Exactly like an adventure," Nathan said, though the word felt bitter on his tongue. There was no adventure here, only escape. He had no clear destination in mind. A motel, a distant town, maybe even his brother's place upstate. All he knew was that he needed to get Ellie away from the wreckage of their home, away from the chaos Clarissa had unleashed. As the miles rolled by, his resolve began to waver. The image of Clarissa's tear-streaked face haunted him. Despite everything, there was a part of him that still loved her, a part that mourned the woman he had married. But that woman felt like a stranger now, replaced by someone he no longer recognized. The weight of the memory card in his pocket was a constant reminder of her betrayal. He thought of the evidence he now carried, the incontrovertible proof of her infidelity. It wasn't just for his own closure, it was for Ellie. He would fight for custody if it came to that. He would protect her at all costs. Back at the house, Clarissa sat in the kitchen, staring at the blank sheet of paper in front of her. She had spent hours drafting messages to Nathan, each one discarded before it could be sent. Nothing she wrote felt adequate. How could she explain the unexplainable? How could she undo the damage she had caused? The doorbell rang, startling her. Her heart leaped as she ran to the door, hoping against hope that Nathan had returned. But when she opened it, she was met with disappointment. Alex stood there, his expression a mix of concern and confusion. "What are you doing here?" she demanded, her voice sharper than she intended. "I was worried about you," Alex said, stepping inside uninvited. "I figured you might need someone to talk to." Clarissa shook her head, her anger bubbling to the surface. "I don't need you, Alex. Not now. Not ever." Alex frowned, taken aback by her tone. "Clarissa, come on. We're in this together." "No," she snapped, cutting him off. "We're not. This is my mess to fix, not yours. You've done enough." Alex opened his mouth to respond, but the look on her face stopped him. Without another word, he turned and left, the door slamming shut behind him. Clarissa leaned against the door, her breath coming in ragged gasps. She knew what she had to do. The next morning, Nathan sat in a diner, Ellie happily munching on pancakes as he stared out the window. His phone buzzed, and he glanced at it reluctantly. It was a message from Clarissa. "I know I can't undo what I've done, but please, Nathan, let me see her. Just for a moment." He stared at the message for a long time, his heart warring with his mind. He wanted to protect Ellie, but he also knew that cutting her mother out completely wasn't the answer. No matter what Clarissa had done, she was still Ellie's mom. Finally, he typed a response, "We'll talk soon." In the stillness of the diner, Nathan felt the faintest flicker of something he hadn't felt in a long time, hope. It wasn't for reconciliation or forgiveness, but for the possibility of a path forward, for Ellie's sake, if nothing else. And for the first time since everything fell apart, he allowed himself to believe that they might find it.